Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everyone, I am really delighted to introduce today's guest, Leo Rossi. As a young Italian Catholic boy from the blue-collar Los Angeles port town of San Pedro, Leo tripped into an improbable dream when he was punished for taking off in the middle of a school field trip. His penance was to work on the backstage crew for the school play, which actually turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to him. For more than 2 decades, Leo worked with bands and artists such as Fleetwood Mac and Stevie Nicks, the Beach Boys, Bette Midler, Diana Ross, Chaka Khan, Billy Idol, and many more to create magical experiences for their audiences. Whether he was running the lights or managing an entire tour, he always felt that he was part of something that was making the world a better place. Leo forged lifelong skills while he learned the value of sacrifice, hard work, dedication, loyalty, and passion. His book, When the Devil Smiles, the Angels Frown, My Life and Times in Rock and Roll, chronicles his experiences and lessons learned. He continues to collaborate on a variety of projects with some of his former crewmates from the hundreds of tours he has worked on. And today, he cruises the high seas on Princess Cruise Lines, giving engaging presentations about his work and the life lessons he has gained over the years. I had the privilege to be on one of those ships in the spring of 2024 and appreciated the messages and life lessons within his talk so much that I invited Leo to be my guest on Work from the Inside Out. All of the proceeds from his book and cruise presentations benefit the 20K Watts, an organization founded by Leo's late son, Ryan, who unfortunately passed away in 2011. 20K Watts is dedicated to giving clean light, fresh water, and medical assistance to any child in the world who needs it. Please join me in welcoming Leo Rossi to Work from the Inside Out. So, Leo, as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we really love to begin at the beginning and take us back to those formative years and how they may have informed or not where you are today. Take us there.
Wow. Well, I believe, and it's true, every day of every part of my life and my journey started from what I learned when I was young. And I was raised traditionally in an Italian Catholic family. And it was a different world, for really first generation American where things were changing. And I like to say that, it's quite the contrast that in a short period of time, less than 40 years, my grandparents and my father and my mother, they were in Italy fishing and doing it. And here I am in a very short time in a stadium with 100,000 people doing rock and roll shows. The contrast is crazy.
Yeah.
When you think about it, and I see about all the time as I think about my grandparents coming to America and finding work, and I'm shopkeepers and janitors, and my father getting into the maritime industry, and then me falling into this crazy world of music. But I never, ever, ever lost faith, even though sometimes I was forced to lose faith because of peer pressure, because it wasn't cool to be God-loving and God-fearing and everything when you were in a rock and roll world. So there were times that, I had to abandon some of my so-called morals just to keep my job and keep relevant. So, everything that I was taught to be afraid of was in the world I ended up in. And I just ended up there by accident. And I can't tell you, it was a force beyond me. I was very young. I took chances and I walked through a door. I was on a field trip to see a Broadway play. First of all, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I literally was going to be a longshoreman. That was my father's plan for me. It was good money, great money, good security. I just didn't want to do it. So I was registering for school, and I had this random teacher come up to me and just say, "Man, you gotta help me out. I have one more kid and I can get out of here. Just sign up." I go, "Well, what is it?" He goes, "It's stage production. It's fun." He goes, "There's never any homework. And, you get out of class a lot because you get to work all the assemblies and stuff. So, it's just," I said, "Okay, great, I'll sign." And I did. And we ended up on a field trip to go see a Broadway play in Long Beach at the old auditorium. And I didn't like the play at intermissions door, thinking I was going to go to the bus, and I ended up backstage. And wow, I was really, really intrigued to see all that stuff. So I sat down and I watched the show, and I was just amazed of the coordination and the people working. And it was like, wow. So it was magic back there more than it was in front. So when the show ended, I got in trouble. They found me and they asked me what I was doing, and I told them. Now, the drama teacher that was on the field trip convinced the technical director at the theater that, punishing me wasn't really a good idea, but to punish me, why don't you make me work, be a stagehand, work it off? I'm sure you need, and they say we have an apprentice program. So I started doing that, and then it went into a full-time apprenticeship, and I was working in the theaters at, 15 years old. And I kept working, but between all the operas, all the rock bands used to come through. Same road crews would come by when they, and they started knowing me by name, and I would fix things for them because I was working with the union guys, and they taught me how to fix stuff and do stuff. And I knew a lot for my age. So they kept asking me to go on tour, and my father wouldn't let me. I had to finish school, which I did. And then shortly after that, I got a phone call to go on tour as a lighting person. And I ended up on tour with The Who. I was 18. And I ended up on tour with The Who. And it just took off from there. It just took off.
Yeah.
And every advantage. I mean, there are times where I remember when I finished The Who tour, I drove down to the lighting office because I had to sign some paperwork, and I didn't know what it was. And it ended up being a W-2 for salary stuff. And then they handed me an envelope, and and I went to the car and I opened the envelope, and there was this check, and it was huge. Wow, really? I get paid for this. It was crazy. So I ended up, never did anything for money because I always did it because I love what I did. Yeah. But then I started meeting, then I met Fleetwood Mac. I met a bunch of other bands, but Fleetwood Mac was coming in to do some rehearsals. And they had called me to get a lighting rig together, but they already called the lighting company that I was working with from the friends of another person. And so they called me and said, "Hey, if you want to do this," they said, "we're going to do it, and we're not going to charge them because we think we want to do the tour. So if we do these rehearsals, we'll probably get the tour. And if we get the tour, then you can do it. But we don't have any money to pay you." And I had nothing going on, nothing. I didn't know what tour was next or anything. And I remember, God, that band's great, because I'd seen them when I was working for another band, Loggins and Messina. I saw Fleetwood Mac open, and I said, wow, they're a good band. So I did it. I did the rehearsal. And then when the lighting designer for the Fleetwood Mac was a friend that kept coming through Long Beach. When he told the band I did it for free, then they asked me to go on tour with them, and I did. And it just went from there. So, yeah, everything that I did, there was never a monetary reason. There was never a reason of ego to like, well, I want to work with this band. I just did I did what I felt was best. But during all that, that's by my book, I had the devil and the angels on my shoulder constantly, when other guys were doing drugs and womanizing and everything, I was going, man, the drugs you're not supposed to do that. And if you were with the groupie, I kept saying, that's somebody's daughter, Yeah. I mean, I had those kind of feelings where, yeah, the older guys were, it was just rock and roll. Yeah. To hide a lot of that. Yeah. Play into it and, to be accepted and not get thrown out off a crew and be a crew road casualty. Yeah. So it was amazing to balance it. And even now, what I'm doing today, sometimes things come my way and I find myself going back to those Italian Catholic weird backgrounds that help me make decisions to do what I do. And I've never done anything for money, and I'll never do anything for money. And that's just something that I totally believe in, and that's the story of, I think, Knights of Rock with all of us, what we do. That's why classic rock is classic rock, because in the early days of classic rock with music, we never did anything for money. We wanted to make a difference. We wanted to change the world. We wanted to, and then the accountants and the lawyers got in the 80s, early 80s, and man, it was over. It was over. It ended quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did that change for you then?
It changed to the fact that I still didn't adopt that trend of going out to make money. So I found myself missing out on certain tours and things where I didn't feel it was right. I don't have any regrets. I have thoughts sometimes if I would have took this tour or that tour, or something would have came my way. But there's many times when I looked at a situation, I said, well, I just don't think that artist is doing things for the right reason, and I don't want to be involved.
Uh-huh.
So it affected me a lot. There are a lot of times I stayed home and maybe did nothing, being where I could have been on tour and I didn't, and then you had to be very careful not to push your ways on other people. So I didn't want to lead by telling people what to do. I sort of wanted to lead by example. And so I would, with younger road guys, I would, they would have a hard time and I would pull them aside, and instead of saying, hey, you got to toughen up and everything, say, no, man, this is where you grow your character. This is where you're going to learn your lessons. So later in life. And a funny story, I was just doing some shows in Hawaii, and I was at this little bar, and this guy kept looking at me, and he came over. He says, "Are you Leo?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You don't remember me, huh?" And I said, "You look really familiar." He says, "I was your guitar tech on Chaka Khan in the 80s. His name is BC, and I saw him, and we hung. And the one thing that he did told me, he says, I took a lot of grief on that tour, but I'll never forget it. And I've carried this lesson for my whole life. And he's in his late 50s and I'm in my 60s. And he said, you taught me that character counts. And you taught me that if I can withstand it and hold my character." And it was really amazing to hear that after 45 years that you're sitting with somebody and they're remembering, something that I learned as a child.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the inside out. Now, if that's just one person that I touched,
yeah,
I don't know how many more there are, but it was nothing that was fabricated, Tammy. I didn't say I'm going to change the world. I just was me, and I did what I was taught to do. And, even when I retired after COVID and didn't want to tour anymore, and I figured it was my turn to give back. And I was blessed with a fortunate background, so why not use it?
Yeah. Well, we're going to get to that. I want to go back in time a little bit more, because I'm curious. I'm looking at this through the lens of, an outsider looking into the world that you worked in for so many years and having certain impressions of what that was like. And it sounds like there was a dichotomy there, right? There was the sex, drugs, and rock and roll side of things, and then here you are, the nice kid who grew up with all these values and morals, and you went into this world that had a lot of other elements to it, some of which I guess went against what you were taught. And I'm just curious how you when you went in at a relatively young age, 18 or actually younger, and what kept you, I may be wrong, maybe it didn't keep you anchored the whole time, maybe you deviated and zigged and zagged, but I could see where as a younger person you could be influenced or pulled in different directions. I know you had different positions over the years too, different levels of, let's say, authority in different situations when you went on tour with different groups and you grew in the business. It's, just to even hear you talk about, leadership, and knowing that you started off being, a member of the team versus leading the team, there's a big difference. And you did this all learning as you went along. So I'm just curious what that thread was for you, or whether that thread ever got frayed.
Yeah, I think, again, what it was, I think a lot of it was, I think growing up, I wasn't really insecure as much as, I grew up with overachieving siblings, and I was sort of the black sheep for a while. And then my little brother was born, and then, he got all the attention. So I think for me, there wasn't a fear of rejection as much as I think a fear of not being noticed. I think being that
Interesting.
I think I had to be noticed. And to do that, I had to go the extra mile and go prove myself. And my father did teach me that, he used to tell me life's under no obligation to give you what you expect. You have to work hard. And I worked hard. But I think more than anything, I think the success of what I was doing and having the accolades of, wow, you're really good and you're so young, kept that part of my soul filled, where I
Mm.
didn't have to feel like, oh my God, some kids my age back then, and they were in that world, and they were doing the drugs and doing all that, not only for fun reasons, which they thought was fun, which it wasn't, but they did it to be relevant and to feel that they were going to be included on this camaraderie of this so-called road crew.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I was like, I'd rather do it through my successes and and go the extra mile for them to accept me that way. But there were times that, of course, I had to do things where I didn't want to do them. But then I had to go in my own space, in my own world, and reconcile a lot of those feelings.
Yeah.
And I think that's where my faith kicked in. It was like, okay, yeah, you were wrong and you did it wrong, but you're forgiven.
Yeah.
And try not to do it again. Not don't do it again. Just try not to do it again.
Yeah. Right.
And it was really hard to not try to do it again, because every day we were bombarded with the drugs, with the girls, with the, sometimes you were doing 6, 7 shows a week and your mind and your body were so fatigued. You had to do substance to stay awake, or you had to do substance to try to go to sleep.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think we was some big rolling party. No, it was a ton of hard work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, miles and miles. We never had days or nights. We had periods of rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes you needed to be chemically induced to deal with that. And, and a lot of my buddies, because I stopped relatively young, but a lot of my buddies that didn't, man, they're paying for it now. They are. I mean, they're giving out. And so, but again, I always never lost my faith.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a holy roller. I don't go to church and the confession and all that, but I believe in higher power. And I believe that we're all here for a reason. I hear that, and I feel that, I hear the voices saying to me, hey, look, we gave you this for a reason. Don't waste it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't.
Yeah.
I come out and, and again, people that weren't in the classic rock era and lived it like we did, side by side with those creative revolutionary giants that were changing the world, will never, ever be able to understand it.
Right.
You had to be there. You had to be there. You had to be in that fiber. You had to share their sweat.
Yeah.
Really understand
well, you
it.
Certainly did do that. I'm curious.
No, we all did. Not only me.
Yeah.
There's a group of us, I mean, there was a lot of hard work guys. There's a lot of guys that didn't make it. There's a lot of guys that just got overwhelmed by the scene. And there's a lot of guys that, their families had problems and they ended up, there's a lot of issues that it wasn't for the faint of heart. That's for sure.
No. I mean, when you're on the road and you're living a very, very different life, the intensity of it, I don't have to tell you about that. But I'm curious, when you talk about changing the world, what did that look like from your perspective? A lot of the work that you did wasn't necessarily, it was observable.
But it wasn't noticed.
Right.
It wasn't obvious.
Yeah.
No, and a lot of it was behind the scenes stuff. I mean, you knew like bands like Fleetwood Mac, and you knew that they were making a difference because people were listening to their music for any kind of emotion they were trying to deal with.
Yeah.
Stevie Nicks and mainly Christine McVie, they started a woman empowerment movement without even trying. They just fell into this space, and every woman started listening to the lyrics. Landslide became an anthem for women to stand up and say to men, I'm not taking this and I don't need to, because look, Stevie doesn't, and look at her. So when you started seeing stuff like that, you really wanted to make that song sound good. You really wanted to make her appearances like in songs like Rhiannon. You wanted to help her give strength to the people that were watching her, men, women, or whatever, children, older women, whatever. So whatever you can do to see that. And, when you saw mothers and daughters coming to concerts together and hugging and crying, the Beach Boys, when I was at the Beach Boys, when you saw 4 generations of families sharing life, hugging, and listen and all singing the same words for a song that the grandparents gave hand down. So for 30 seconds, 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 years, whatever, if you were able to help those bands give those people the moments because you're presenting that feeling, that image, that love to them, then you know you're making a difference. But none of us in Knights of Rock, none of us wrote, and I hate, there's no word roadie. We hate that friggin', we're not roadies. We were technicians.
Right.
We were early adopters. We were AI before AI. And what we did is, we didn't do it for the money. We didn't do it for fame. We didn't never said, we did a great job. We did it because we loved what we did and we knew we were making a difference.
Well, that's the distinction I was really hoping you would bring out, and you have, and that is that even though you're saying, you did all these shows in a week and how, it could be exhausting. And yet it sounds like through those tours, you still could stop even for a moment and know that it was making a difference, that it wasn't just another show or another concert. You were way more than technicians. It wasn't just, I have to make sure the sound is good here or the lighting is good here or that this has to happen a certain way. I know you had to attend to all of that.
You did, but I remember the first show on the Rumors Tour in 1977, we packed up all our gear and we went up to Berkeley and we did a show for Jacques Cousteau because the whale issues. Nobody got paid. Not the band, nobody. No expenses. We all just did it. And originally I said, okay, no big deal. We do it, and everything. But then when I saw it in Rolling Stone or some newspaper that said Fleetwood Mac is trying to save the whale population in the world, and it was on a grander scale, and then it got onto the news, and you're sitting there going like, well, they could have done it on their own, but they didn't. We did it with them. So all of a sudden you see, I wasn't like, well, hey, I did that. We didn't do that. We were, we were making a difference. And then you started to see it grow. You started to see it get bigger and bigger, and you started to see it to spread out. And, I don't think, I think one of the distance, what do we like to tell people is in the old days, we did lighting and we did sound, but we went out of our way to hide everything. We didn't want people to see our lights. All we wanted them to see was the stage and the band. Now you go to a show and there's video walls and there's lights moving, and the lights are part of the whole show, and it's distracting from what I believe the artist is, because a lot of the artists that don't have the talent to pull off what Fleetwood Mac did with the five of them, which was the actual art of it. I recently saw a clip from 1986. I saw a concert that Prince did in Germany. It's on YouTube. And there were no sceneries. There was no video walls or nothing, but he had all these pieces of scenery and he played all over the stage and he told this story with his music and his dancing. Mm-hmm. And the lighting was just incredible. And I'm sitting there going like, that's friggin' art.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if somebody came up to us and said, wow, the lights were really great, that was sort of an insult. Because we didn't want that. We wanted them to say the band was great. Stevie looked good. Christine looked amazing. Oh my God, during the chain, the lighting was, but the last thing we wanted to do is people to look at moving lights and then not look at the band. It's a completely different thought process between now and then. And there was a survey that came out to them, and I love Taylor Swift. I think what she's doing is phenomenal. Here's a that less than 10 years ago, she was in Australia playing clubs, and now she's played more stadium shows than anybody in Australia's history. She's really done her work. But they did this thing that there's so much information overload that they were asking people, can you name at least 10 songs she played? And they can. Because their heads are just so filled with everything. I remember she was standing in the middle of the stage and it came up, what song was she singing? When in the old days, say, hey, remember when Stevie was twirling around? What song was that? Rhiannon.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of times I see, and I tell people, just because you have $1 million worth of lights doesn't mean you need to use them. When a singer's singing a song and it's a ballad, man, one soft light and let them sing without this twirling, and you know what I mean? So the thought process is completely different. But for us, it was like, you know, we knew we were making a difference. I mean,
Yeah.
but we did it for the right reason. If there was a politician that the bands didn't like, there was a reason they didn't like him. It wasn't because some lobbyist was paying them.
Right. I can really appreciate what you're saying too. And I think it almost is, it's like you want to trust the audience to meet you part way there and not have to overload them with all this extra stuff, thinking that
they're being bombarded. They're being bombarded.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bombarded every day. And then the whole thing about the climate movement. I mean, you're running around the world with 100 trucks of carbon, but a lot of these bands are now low voltage lights, so they don't burn as much power. They're using green fuel. They're not using water bottles anymore. They have canteens. They're trying to do their part. But man, it's so hard, Tammy. Where do you draw the line between putting on a good show and thinking about conscious efforts? And it's harder now than it's ever been. So
well, it's good. It's good to point these things out, and I think the audience, the listeners here, are going to really appreciate hearing your perspective on that. And I'm curious, as you went forward, because you've still been working shows over the years. You retired before COVID, but that was just a few years ago. So you went from doing more of the technical things to really running the whole operation.
Yeah.
How did that evolve for you?
Technology. In 1982, Fleetwood Mac was asked to do the US festivals. It was the party for Apple when they went public. They got the billionaires overnight, so they asked Fleetwood Mac to do the show in the California desert, the US festival, and we did. I was the production manager, and I got tied in really tight with Apple. And Ken Calais, who was the band's producer for Rumors and a lot of the records, he was working with Microsoft, and I started working with Apple. And we got inside of Apple, and they liked being in rock and roll, and we sort of liked these new computers.
Yeah.
And then they said to us, hey, so you're Fleetwood Mac, but we have this new computer coming out. It's called a Mac. Macintosh. So we started lining at the hip. So they would come to us with software and say, hey, what do you think about this? And hey, we found a way to make a videotape work on a computer screen. It's this thing called Video Spigot, turned into QuickTime. So we were just, so after the 93 Clinton inauguration, I stopped and I built a record label with Ken all about digital technology. But what started to happen is I was so adversed in computers, and the computers were starting to get into the rock and roll world. So we were able to send text over phone lines with the rubber cups, and we were able to create documents and stage plots and, with the old dot matrix printers.
Sure.
So that technology allowed me to excel out of lighting and more into production, and then from production into tour management. And because the technology was so second nature to me, and the technology was now driving the industry. And so I was way ahead of it at a young age. I think my first, I was 21. My first production manager job was right after Tusk, 1979. So, but from there, I used technology really to expand myself into management. Then all of a sudden spreadsheets came in. Had to account for things because the accountants and the lawyers. So I was on top of that, how we could settle shows. And so we started sharing information, all of us tour managers and production managers at the time. So the technology drove me more into a management role.
Yeah.
And to me, the technology was just as creative as doing a lighting plot.
Yeah.
Because you were putting this puzzle together. And I think, I used to have a fight with accountants. Tour accountants were good because most tour accountants came from the road and they knew how to handle a crew with the numbers. But business managers didn't understand that.
Yeah, interesting.
So let me give you, for instance, you're running a crew and you're putting a budget together for a tour. And your crew is going to run from New Orleans to Denver. and it's a 3-day bus ride. But you put in the budget airfare to let the buses run empty and let the crew fly so they get a day off and be healthy and be happy. But then a business manager would come and say, why are you doing that? We're paying for the buses, And I had to remind them, and this is, I think, what the difference between a lot of good tour accountants and managers is, behind every number, there's an emotion. And if you can't find that emotion, which most accountants can't because they've never been on the road, they don't know what it's like to sit on a tour bus for 3 days and eat some greasy friggin' truck stop food. And then I tell them, I say, but then by the time you get to Denver and your band has one night off, the next day they're burnt out, they're tired. The sound guys are good, the lighting guys are tired, and then the show sucks. So you're defeating the whole purpose.
Right.
If you don't have enough money to do the tour and do it right, then I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
So we started finding ways like sponsorship deals, or we started finding different ways to make more money from the promoters. So being that I was in the technology, I started using the technology more as an art than I did, and it would enable me to figure out the tour logistics and everything much quicker. So I can come back to people and say, either we have to find 5 or 6 more dates with more money, or take less days off because your overhead was weekly and it stayed the same. But if you're doing 2 or 3 shows, you better do 4.
Mm-hmm.
So you were able to lay these things out like a Rubik's Cube puzzle. And that became an art to me, going, okay, we could do this, but you need to add 3 more shows, or we need to find another X amount of dollars to make it work. So that became very exciting to me. And then, there was an interview once on the New York Times. They interviewed us. And I made a comment. I says, yeah, one of these days, this is like way early on. I says, you're going to be able to sit in your hotel room and book the whole tour, hotels and everything. And I said, you're going to be able to walk up to it and hold up your phone, any kind of phone, and buy a soda.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I saw it coming. But so technology took me out of the whole tech area and into the management role.
Mm-hmm.
Then combining technology with the element of personalities, because technology is great until it fails.
Right.
Once technology fails, if you don't have the backup of the human element to right that wrong, you're done.
Right. No, I love I love the picture you're painting of this. And I think it's interesting to hear how that evolved as you moved through, how things evolved and how you moved through your career that way. Because it's really fascinating. And,
I remember when I went back on the road in 2006, 2007. I wasn't going to go back on the road, but I took my daughter for her driving test and she passed. And she says, Dad, we're not going to be around much anymore, me and the boys. And she goes, why don't you go back on the road? We know you love it and you took care of us your whole life. And I said, no. So somehow I ended up back on the road, and I was working with John Fogerty. And I was still involved with Apple, and Apple said, we have this new thing called a smartphone. Smartphone. You said, what is it? He goes, well, instead of the flip phone stuff, this has applications and everything. As before it was an iPhone. It was called the smartphone. So I went to Apple and I started looking at it, and it was going to be released in June of 2007. Well, in late May 2007, they gave me 10 iPhones. And they said, take them on your tour and give them to the band members. Let's keep it quiet. Don't say anything. But can you report back on what you would like this phone to do? So I gave some to the band. There's only 2 or 3 people in the band that really said, okay, they didn't want to deal with it. It was a hassle to them. But for me, it was like, it was like a kid in a candy store.
Yeah.
And I was able to send emails and notes from my phone. And so that opened up a whole new world, to me. And watching Apple develop, into that whole thing. Mm-hmm. Steve Jobs changed the world, because they wouldn't let him into music, and the Beatles had Apple and the Apple records and and then finally Jobs says, you sue us, we have more money than you now. But by the way, we can make your music and make you a hell of a lot more money by this platform. And of course, greed took over. But so in the middle of all that, with the record label, I was doing the first digital download streams with a company called Liquid Audio with Capitol Records. I think the first download we did was Duran Duran, White Lines. And we cut our teeth with that one because it didn't sound good and people's speakers were out of it was a nightmare, but it was the option again. And that's when I started seeing that what Steve Jobs at Apple had invented was literally going to just change this world on its own side. But so Ken and I, with our 5.1 Entertainment Group record label, we were the liaisons between the technology world and the entertainment world. So we were doing 5.1 audio streams and surround sound and DVDs, which was the shortest lived technology in the history of the world because it wasn't eliminating what the content holders needed to eliminate: warehousing, production, trucking, distribution. And then they first started doing the overline. I mean, man, I was like, okay, this online and these wireless router things. And so, where you had CDs lasted maybe 20 years, DVDs lasted maybe 3-4 years and was a dead platform. Man, all of a sudden, look what came out of the loop. All that plastic, distribution, trucking, people to warehouse it. Oh my God. Now it was just push a button and boom, it was there.
Yeah.
We were right in the middle of all that. But, you had Ken on the other side was making sure that the quality of the music was great,
right.
More data through the lines, and the lines started getting bigger. And then we ended up selling that record label. But I think that, again, that was an art in itself. To balance and to explain to the artist what it really was. So even today, to this day, with Knights of Rock and the new project, we are so knee deep into AI. AI is not a monster. AI is a beautiful thing if it's done the right way. People go, we're not going to, they're not going to be war with computers. And yes, we have all this, everybody always go to the fear factor first, but imagine if we're telling a story of being somewhere. But with AI, we could take you exactly there to the exact moment and tell you what it was like in the hopes of history being a lesson to help.
Yes.
Because history is our best teachers.
Yeah.
So if we can tell these little kids that these Gen A's that come up all the time and say, God, what was it like to mix analog?
Yeah.
What was it like to do this? Oh, let me show you.
Even those of us, I'm speaking for myself, I'm a baby boomer, and I've learned a lot. I sat in on some of your talks, and there's a lot I've learned too. Tell us about Knights of Rock and what you're doing.
Knights of Rock, Knights of Rock started in 2006. It's been that long. It was a group of us that, we were sick and tired of hearing all the BS of people trying to tell what it was like. And we all got together one day because I had a house up in San Pedro that I was using as an office, and it was called the Point House because on this cliff. It was beautiful. And people used to come in and write. Bands used to write. They used to fight. They used to do TV interviews. And a lot of times guys would come and stay if they were out of town. They didn't want to stay at a hotel. So one night, a bunch of guys came over, and we were sitting around. I had some dinner brought in, and I put a DAT tape under the couch, and I pushed record. And it was like 4 hours of us telling stories. And I listened to it. I was driving to San Francisco, and I went, oh, my God, this is the real story of classic rock. So I called my friend Jerry Levin and Mark Brickman, who's they're both great people. Mark's a great designer. So we decided to do a roundtable at the theater of 10 people and film it just for yuck's sake to see what it was like. And we did. And we didn't have any plans to do documentary. We just wanted to, sort of document what it was like to be in classic rock. But our mantra ended up being, we want to tell the real story. If somebody Googles classic rock 150 years from now, we want ours to come up with the real story and not the BS, the behind the music,
right?
Who killed the rock star, all the crap that's out there.
Yeah.
So we're on a mission to do that. And while we're doing that, to help children in extreme poverty around the world live, have a better life, to have some of our road buddies that don't have insurance, that need help for any cause. And I work with a bunch of different organizations that will call up and say, hey, we need this. Can you do it? How much is it? And we'll go raise the money and we'll do it. Everything from hand crank flashlights for the hurricane kids that are stuck in, all these hurricanes, to children with skin diseases that need, red light treatment, water filters, orphanages that want to be self-sustained. We give them instruments to create bands where they can play and make music for themselves. So anytime someone comes up and says, hey, there's an initiative in the name of my late son, Ryan, who actually started the charity, we do what we can. We just do what we can. And, it's like I said, we were blessed, man. We were very fortunate. So it's a lot of us, it's just we feel it's our turn to give back. So Knights of Rock became the storyteller, I guess, of all it is. And then it feeds all these different charities through what we do.
So, and each of you, there's several of you in Knights of Rock, right?
Oh, there's a ton. I mean, anybody who's ever been on the road in those days that we all tour with, they can walk up and say, and jump on stage with me. And I mean, there's hundreds of them, and there's guys that sometimes they're on a cruise with their family and they're on board and I go, hey, you're on stage. Let's go. We're doing this,
Yeah.
But there's a core of us that obviously worked together a lot in the mid 70s that like to tell the story. And but if anybody that sees this that was on the road in those times wants to come up and be part of it, man, come on. That's what it's about,
That's how I found you. I was on a cruise and sat in on some of your talks on the cruise ship, and I thought you were an amazing storyteller and speaker and had just so many the stories were fun to listen to because I could relate to the music you were talking about, but also the way you talked about the experience and the character of people and the relationships and the experiences you had growing up through the years, being on tour, working with a variety of people. And it was just so inspiring to me. And
I hope one day I get to bring the guys back on. We did before COVID, and I mainly only work Princess Cruises. There are other cruise lines that are calling, but this isn't a living for me, so it's not like I have to do it. I only do what I feel is necessary to do to keep the charity rolling.
Sure.
There's a lot of talk about the Netflix and the A&E and all that, but I think we're better off, I think, doing our own YouTube channel so we can control it. None of those people will ever give us creative control.
Right.
And that's what we will not give up ever. We'll never ever give up creative control. We want to tell our story. So there's been a couple offers and we're going Netflix greenlights everything. We'll just get lost. But people went, okay, we want to do this. Well, who got creative control? Well, we do. I said, no, sorry, we're not interested.
Yeah.
Same with the book, People ask the screenplays. The first question I ask them, who has creative control?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm not interested. I don't care. I really don't.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the book, When the Devil Smiles, The Angels Frown, My Life and Times in Rock and Roll by Leo Rossi. I'm sitting here right now looking at a copy of it.
It's just what we talked about early on, the angels and the devils.
That's right.
So I got a lot of pushback from people putting devil in the title. And I said, when you read the book, you'll understand.
Yeah. Well, everybody likes to have an opinion, right, Leo?
Yeah. But I said, just read it and you'll understand why. And then you'll go, okay, I get it, But there's so many people. Why are you glorifying the devil? I'm not.
Yeah.
But I had that devil and angel on my shoulder. And
that was that,
and
so you're on the cruise, you're on the Princess Cruise for a while now. And then anything else coming up that you'd want?
I'm writing my second book.
Oh, you are?
I'm 2/3 done.
All right.
My Life in Times. It's a trilogy. So I'm writing the first part you have. The second part is 2006 to my retirement in 2018. And then the middle book is all about the record label. To a lot of people think it's the best story. So that's the one I'm holding for last. So I'm bookending it.
All right.
This one, the working title, because I was going back on the road It's called This Old Guitar with New Strings.
I love it. So that one hasn't come out yet, though, the second
No,
one.
hopefully by Christmas.
All right, good. Well, we will.
This morning I was up early in the morning and I'm coming in. We're in Scotland. I'm coming through the Firth of Clyde, and I realized, man, I'm revisioning. And right now I'm writing about my life and times. One of my life and times with Diana Ross, and it was amazing. But it was a lot of work, but it was such fun work. And she was so amazing. And I find myself writing it. And when I'm done, I'm physically tired because it's just drawn so much out of me, emotionally, and the tenseness of, and then I go, man, I'm tired.
But it's a good tired, isn't it?
It is a good tired, but my gosh, I didn't realize that writing could physically make you just go,
mm-hmm.
So
I love it.
Yeah. And then today, I walked around Scotland, and I love to go to pawn shops, and see stuff. And I found a little dulcimer guitar that it was really beautiful. And it's like, it's one of these guitars that's, it's just a hidden gem. And I just, wow, you know what? The guy didn't want much for it. He didn't know where he really had. So I said, oh, yeah, I'll take it. Little tiny thing. And I'm able to, just bring it with me and play. So it's, little things like that are, and I've been drawing a lot. I've been doing a lot of drawing, and so just trying to stay creative. On this ship, I don't do as many shows as I do on the other ships.
Yeah.
There's a lot of port days. So yeah, it's different. This is a different ship. But, people come up after the shows and, like people, hey, can we ask you some questions? I'm going, sure, and it's almost like, now it's like, hey, I'm going to be over here this time of day. So why don't you all come up and you can ask me questions. So we can have fun with it, Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your openness and your attitude about that. I mean, I think some people would want to, kind of like, I gave my talk, now leave me alone.
No. And, my goal in some of the shows that I do is to try to hold the Gen Zs and the millennials more, because I noticed that when I'm telling the story, the first part of being Italian and growing up in it, before I get to the music part, they don't give it a chance. Their attention span, they tend to walk out. And I want to say from the stage, stop, just give it 5 minutes. I swear it gets better. But they don't. They don't have the attention span. I think they're so used to swiping left in the iPads and phones, and but I have to tell everybody that we got to stop banging on the millennials, because
I agree.
There's a lot of their stuff, and all that stuff that, that's all they do is text. But I think you have to remember is, we are the generation that invented that for them.
Right. That's right.
So we didn't have to, and we did. And why did we do it? It's because we invented that because it's something that we didn't have.
Right.
You can't blame them. Now we got to find a way to tell them we didn't invent it for that. We invented it, but the way, what's better? Them communicating like this or not communicating at all?
Right. I've said that.
Give them a break,
Yeah, I agree.
So I tend to, like in my shows, you heard me say, hey, you guys didn't want those trophies. We gave them to you.
That's right.
So, we got to give them a break. We really do. And I feel, that all this division is going to go away. It's going to, there's
I hope you're right.
Nothing more powerful in life than the human spirit from every angle of every corner of this planet. So no matter what we think, how many people think that the world is over, it's not over. It's going to turn, but you know what? It's going to take a lot of hard work from everybody on all sides. We need purple, like Prince.
I agree. We need purple. I love it. So, Leo, question for you. I have 2 questions for you as we wrap up here. I love that we need more purple. One is, if somebody wants to learn more about what you're up to and all the things that you're doing, what's the best place for them to find you other than on a princess ship?
I wish I would stay more on top of Knights of Rock and on social media stuff, but I just can't do it. I don't, knightsofrock.com shows the Knights of Rock thing. If you go to a knightstale.org, it shows my solo shows and what I do there.
Okay.
Like it's a little 1-minute clip. And there's some things of what I do on stage for the charity. What we do for the charity, which we don't have Facebook, we don't have Instagram, none of that. For the charity, we have a website where people could just see what we do, and then they can
Great.
donate if they want.
That would be great. Yeah.
It's 20K watts, watts.org.
Great. Okay.
And I endorse people to look at all the videos because there's some really impactful things. It's not, there's some very impactful things that we have done. But my son, Ryan, it was his deal. And he wanted to be judged more by actions than by sayings. And so he used to tell everybody and he told me, he says, Dad, he says, the only way this is going to be successful when we can say no to Oprah. So he didn't want the schmooze. He didn't want anything. So we wave a flag and go, look what we did.
Right.
Every once in a while in my Instagram of Nights of Rock, I'll say, hey, I need some help for the kids in Haiti that just got hammered by a hurricane.
Right.
And people step up.
Right.
But you'll never see me. Here I am in Cozumel and I'm having a tortilla,
Yeah.
Sometimes it just, oh God, I see some of these people. And don't they know that people are hurting and some people don't have jobs and they're trying to feed their families and they're sitting there bragging about where they're at in the world and they're at some beach and look at me and, I'm on a cruise and this and that. It just fries me that there's no thought of people are hurting and you're just like, oh, this is my office today and you're sitting on a beach.
Right.
It really aggravates me. I never do that. I will never do that. And I'm just hoping that people will be more sensitive. And I don't think people understand when they do that on these public forums, they're probably alienating more people than they're pleasing.
I think you're right. Yeah. Yeah. I've had that conversation.
So, any of that, if you just Google my name, stuff comes up, especially through the cruise lines and everything else. But, the Nights of Rock sort of shows, it's fun. It's a little 28-minute clip of us sitting around the table.
It's great. I've watched it actually.
And then I have a little website that I throw stuff up every once in a while. It's called Stories by Nights. And that's me during COVID. And even now when I'm driving or something, I'll put up multiple cameras and I'll tell a story and I'll put assets around it. Mm-hmm. Just fun stuff of being on the road and traveling through the Alps and what the sound guys did for pranks and
that's
just
great.
Fun stuff. Yeah.
Well, in the show notes, we are going to include those links so that if people want to get more of a taste and a feel of Leo Rossi and all of his adventures in life, they'll get that. And I want to close out with one final question for you. And that is that, a lot of people who listen to this podcast are thinking about what's next for them. And how to even think about it. And I'm wondering if you might have a key piece of advice you might give to somebody who's trying to decide where they're headed next.
Yeah, dream. The world needs dreamers. The world needs doers.
Yeah.
But the world needs dreamers that do.
Yeah, there you go.
And you're never too old.
I agree.
And I say this after every single one of my first episodes. When you dream, man, and you chase your dreams, you learn so much about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You learn a lot about yourself. And you know what? Your dreams have to be for the right reasons. And I think if you just do right by people, by chasing your dream and making sure your dream is going to be valuable to others and not yourself, it's all going to come back to you in tenfold. And I think that no one's ever going to be on their deathbed looking up and saying, I wish I had another dollar.
Yeah, there you go.
I wish I would have done this. You got to seize every day you can, I mean, I don't think there's more joy in the world than taking what you have as an adult and having your experiences of life and handing it back to the youth and watching them grow from what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to remember you by what kind of car you had, what you drove. They're going to remember your legacy is by what you left on this earth and what you did to make a change. So chase your dreams every day. Don't ever think you're too old. I think everybody should write their story. You don't have to write it now. You can speak it into an iPhone.
That's right.
Because there's something in your life. There's something in everybody's life that everybody on the planet would be interested in. And it's like our fingerprints. No two lives are the same. So when you should just chase your dreams every day and don't be afraid and don't think that you don't have the ability. Some people go to me, oh, well, my story's not like yours. It doesn't matter. I'm going, well, tell me your story. I go, well, that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. And you guess what? You tell your story, someone's going to pick up on your story and you're going to help them one day through a problem. And someone's going to come up to you and say, wow, you really helped me.
Mm-hmm.
That's the greatest gift of all, man.
I agree. Totally.
To me.
Well, Leo, thank you for sharing your story today. This has been a joy and a pleasure. And there's no doubt in my mind you've been living and working from the inside out. I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today and joining us from the cruise ship in Scotland.
Well, like I said, there's a reason that we all end up in these spaces together, and you and I ended up on a ship, and I just met you and you saw me, and this is the way life works. And it's like I said, it's my turn to give back. So as long as, like my son Ryan used to say, just love it every day. Just love it. Just love every day. And
that's great.
The world will change.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of my interview with Leo Rossi. What is your key takeaway from our conversation? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 261. And while you're there, you can also subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes. If you're feeling it, please help me to inspire more people to grow their careers from the inside out by clicking on the Apple Podcasts button and leave an honest rating and brief review there. That's what really helps give the podcast visibility and helps more people. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out. Break through 9 common obstacles and design a career that fulfills you. It's available through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. Thanks for listening, and remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.